Chapter 671. Olivia was eating. For some reason, she felt uneasy, even though she was starving. She picked up a ceramic spoon but dropped it. It fell to the floor and broke into pieces. Olivia reflexively bent over to pick it up. Janice spoke up. "Leave it. Let the maids pick it up." But Olivia had already cut herself on one of the broken pieces. Her blood dripped onto the white ceramic piece. Janice called over a maid to bandage Olivia's wound. Olivia spaced out as she looked at the blood. "How long has Ethan been out?" "Don't worry. He should be back soon," Janice reassured her. Suddenly, Janice's phone, which was on the table, rang. "I need to take this." She let go of Olivia and took the call. It was unclear what the person said over the line. Janice's expression turned serious, and she stood up abruptly. "Okay. I'll send reinforcements immediately." Olivia's uneasiness grew. "Mom, what's wrong?" "It's nothing. Just a minor issue. You should finish the food. I'll deal with the problem." Janice left as soon as she said that. She didn't even stick around and provide a more detailed explanation. Olivia had a feeling that the call had something to do with Ethan. It was already dark out. She quickly dialed Ethan's number, but he didn't pick up. She tried calling the other bodyguards, but their phones were turned off, or they didn't pick up. Olivia quickly ran after Janice, but she saw Janice getting into a car and driving away. What was going on? Olivia tried to call Janice, but the line was occupied. It was evident that Janice was busy. Joanne, who was always with Janice, was also nowhere to be seen. Olivia felt uneasy as she paced around the house. She was still a stranger in this city. She had no choice but to run toward Harold's building, hoping he wasn't in a haze. As soon as she reached the yard, Olivia saw Harold holding his cane with a serious expression. "Grandpa, something might have happened to Ethan." Harold was different from his usual self. "I know. Don't worry. Our people are already on the way." Olivia noticed that Harold was holding a cross in his hand. He clutched the cross tightly as he was talking. Although Harold was in his casual clothes, he was exuding bone-chilling bloodlust. "Grandpa, I'm still worried. Can you please tell me what happened?" "Simply, he fell into a trap set up by his enemies." Harold sighed. Ethan grew up in Aldenvine and spent a lot of time there. Even though he came here for business trips a lot, he never stayed long enough to learn about the situation here. He tried to go after the man who was after your life but was lured to an abandoned factory site. There were bombs planted there, and when Ethan got there, Olivia covered her mouth in disbelief. Bombs. There were also toxic substances spread in the area by the explosions. The amount is lethal to humans. Harold's words were like heavy blows on Olivia. She blanked out. How could this happen? Ethan was just talking to her not long ago. Why did this happen so suddenly? After a long while, Olivia returned to her senses and asked, Is he okay?" Harold sighed. "He might not make it." Chapter 672. Olivia felt like someone had hit her on the head. She staggered and took a few steps back. She barely managed to steady herself after leaning on the table. She felt weak at the knees. "Olivia, nothing is absolute. My conclusion was made based on the perspective of a normal man. Explosions and toxic substances would be too much for any regular man. But Ethan isn't a regular person. He had been trained professionally and survived all sorts of extreme situations. We have to have faith in him. He will be fine because he will overcome the odds. He's currently missing. I do not have confirmation yet. The explosions were too widespread. They were at an abandoned factory site. No one lives there, and the surveillance cameras there have fallen into disrepair. So, no one knows what happened there." Olivia was in despair. Since she regained consciousness, Ethan had been telling her that people were trying to harm her. But she had no memories of the past, so she couldn't grasp the gravity of the situation. Olivia started to feel anxious and scared after learning that Ethan had gone missing and had likely died in the fire. Even the men he brought with him hadn't been found yet. "Grandpa, can you have someone bring me to the scene? I have to take a look. I would only feel restless if I stayed home." "No, it might still be dangerous there. Like I said, there are toxic substances. No one knows the situation there. You're the target, to begin with. They took Ethan out to remove people that are protecting you. The Miller residence is the safest place for you. So, you must stay here. But, Harold's expression was stern. This is something you must get used to as his wife. You can't go there even if he dies. Harold mentioned death so casually, but it was a heavy blow to Olivia. All we can do now is have faith in him as the situation remains unclear. We need to believe that he will survive. Harold comforted Olivia for a while and then asked a maid to bring her back to her room. After Olivia was gone, Harold's expression turned dark. He didn't expect someone to target one of the Millers in this city. The composure he kept before Olivia was gone. His expression was solemn, and his temperament turned chilling and dominant. Eric. A man emerged from the shadows. Yes, sir. Dispatch some men to look into it. Find Ethan, no matter the cost. Also, utilize the Skynet. I want to see who's behind this. Understood. The man disappeared into the night. Harold leaned on his cane, veins bulging on the back of his hand. He was the one who raised Ethan and cared for him more than anyone else. He wouldn't accept that Ethan is dead. He couldn't accept that. Edmund quickly approached Harold and said, "Calm down, Mr. Harold. Don't forget that your health isn't what it used to be. Fortune will smile on Mr. Miller. He will be fine." Edmund handed Harold an aspirin as he said that. Harold leaned back into his chair, but his expression was still stormy. The person was clearly after Olivia. Why would he resort to lethal methods when dealing with Ethan? Edmund, do you think that illegitimate bastard is behind this? After Harold regained clarity, he quickly caught up with domestic and international happenings. Naturally, he knew about what Daryl had done in Aldenvine. Edmund poured him a glass of warm water. It's hard to tell. There isn't enough proof yet. But, I have faith that Mr. Miller will be fine. Chapter 673. After taking the medicine, Harold realized that his heartbeat was slowing down. Ethan wasn't an amateur. He had always been experienced in this area. Harold believed that he would escape as well. Still, when Harold closed his eyes, he could imagine the flames filling the sky. Humans were powerless when faced with huge disasters like this. It was like an avalanche. Even a skilled fighter couldn't do anything about it. Seeing his exhausted expression, Edmund hastily coaxed. "Don't worry too much, Mr. Harold. The fire at the scene still hasn't been put out yet, and there is poisonous gas everywhere. Our men have gone to search for Mr. Miller. They should have news soon." Harold lay back on the chair, placing his hands on his forehead. "If he dies there, how am I going to face his grandmother when I die and see her in the future?" Edmund stood at the side. Looking at Harold's graying hair, he finally realized how old Harold was getting. He sighed. "Let's trust that Mr. Miller will be fine." Olivia went back to her room in a daze. As soon as the door closed, she leaned against the door and slid onto the floor. She kept recalling Ethan's actions. She could see in her head images of the deep look in his eyes when he looked at her and the passionate embrace he held her in. She felt her eyes turning warm, and the hot liquid splashed onto her arm. Olivia reached up to touch her cheeks. Were those tears? Her heart was aching terribly. Was she so worried about Ethan? It wasn't until that moment that she realized something. Perhaps Ethan was more important to her than she imagined. The scariest part was that she was very worried about him, but she couldn't do anything. Olivia felt like she was a beast trapped in a cage. She didn't know what happened in the past, nor did she know where her enemies were. She felt extremely helpless in this situation. As she hugged her head, her mind was in a mess. It shouldn't be like this. The enemy was targeting her, so how could she drag other people into this? "Where are you, Ethan?" she whispered in her heart. Olivia dialed the number she had committed to memory over and over again. It still wouldn't go through. What should she do? What could she do? Olivia navigated around her phone, but she found that there were only a few contacts listed. Also, none of them could be reached right now. She seemed to have everything. But when she thought about it, Olivia realized that she had nothing. She didn't have family or friends. Ethan had been protecting her all this while. But if he disappeared from this world, she only had herself left. She didn't want to cry, but the tears kept coming. Could it be that her disinterest in Ethan was only an illusion? Was it possible that, in reality, she was already deeply in love with Ethan? Her phone on the floor suddenly rang. With tears streaming down her face, Olivia answered it right away. "How is it, Mom?" The howling wind sounded from the other end of the line. She didn't know where Janice was, but the latter's voice was mixed in with the loud wind. "No news yet so far. Were you crying?" Janice's voice sounded extra cold. Olivia hastily wiped her tears away. "Mom, I'm anxious about Ethan. Is there anything I can do? Take care of yourself. I'll tell you if there's any updates. For now, no news is good news, alright. Okay, rest early, I'm taking care of things here." After reassuring Olivia, Janice hastily ended the call. At that moment, she was in a helicopter, looking down at the fire that was still burning. The fire was lighting up the edge of the ocean. Chapter 674. Under the glow of the fire, the sea looked like a roaring monster. Joanne described the situation back then. "Mrs. Miller Sr., our people hadn't even approached the place when an explosion sounded from Mr. Miller's location. I even heard gunshots in the fire. When we hurried there, the situation was already out of control. We didn't bring any gas masks with us, and the fire was too big. There were also snipers getting ready in the distance, so..." Joanne's eyes were filled with guilt. Ethan didn't expect that, but even she wasn't aware that the enemies would be so cruel. Their plan was also so tightly linked together that there was no room for compromise. They made use of Ethan's intention to capture them alive. Then, they set up a trap for Ethan to jump into. Janice said with a dark expression, "I heard that they hired 100 elite mercenaries to assassinate Liv a few months ago. Now, Liv has already gone overseas. But they not only knew her location quickly, but they also prepared all this in such a short time. Who exactly is this person? No matter who it is, they can't have been an ordinary person. We underestimated them this time. We can only pray for Mr. Miller's safety." The helicopter circled in the air. They couldn't descend in that situation. Janice felt extremely annoyed in her heart. Look into them at all costs. I want to know who it was that was bold enough to attack my son. Janice frowned deeply. Investigate the illegitimate son. He has a motive. Understood, Mrs. Miller Sr. It was late at night. A person was standing on a balcony of a presidential suite in a hotel. They wore a bathrobe, and they held a wine glass in their hand. They took a sip from it. It felt amazing to look down at the world at their feet. The Millers couldn't sleep a wink throughout the night. Olivia also waited through the night with her eyes wide open. Her phone was right next to her. She wished she could hear the familiar ringtone again. But she had waited a whole night, and the sky had turned from darkness to light. But in the end, she didn't get anything. The maid coaxed her. "Please rest for a while, Mrs. Miller. If you don't want to, you can have breakfast, too." Olivia had gastric pain a few times last night, and she felt like she was numb to the pain by now. She turned mechanically to look at the maid. "I can't stomach anything. Mrs. Miller Sr. told me to bring you downstairs for breakfast." When Olivia heard that it was Janice's orders, she rushed down the stairs. Janice sat at the dining table as always. "Is there any news, Mom?" The fire was put out later in the night. They found a few burnt corpses, and they've already sent the bodies for autopsy. When Olivia heard the word, corpses, her vision blacked out. She almost fell from the stairs. Fortunately, Joanne caught her in time. "Mrs. Miller, calm down. Even if they found corpses, it might not have been Mr. Miller." Olivia was helped to the dining table. Harold was dining with them today, which was a rare sight. He seemed to have gotten much older overnight, but he remained patient as he comforted Olivia. "That kid won't get killed so easily. Sit down and eat breakfast for now." Janice and Harold trusted Ethan a lot. But Olivia didn't understand where the trust came from. She sat down as she was told. Taking a bowl of soup, she drank it carelessly. "Grandpa, when are the autopsy results coming out?" Harold glanced at his watch. "Soon." Olivia tightened her grip on the spoon. Just then, Edmund strode in. "Mr. Harold, Kenneth and his family are here." When Harold heard that name, His eyes widened in rage. Who allowed them to come in? Aren't we in a mess enough as it is? Tell them to get lost right now. Chapter 675. Dad, I'm glad to hear your voice as loud and lively as always. Kenneth's voice rang out calmly from the living room. He had visited a few times in recent years, but he was driven off every time. He was a proud man, so he didn't want to come over often, either. But today was different. Because of his forceful attitude, the security guards didn't dare act too recklessly. After all, everyone knew that Kenneth was Harold's only son. No one dared to offend him lest he came back and took over in the future. This time, he wasn't the only one who paid a visit. He even came with his whole family, Jessica and Daryl. Olivia put down the bowl she had barely taken a few sips out of. Looking at the three, she was confused for a moment. She had no idea who was the joke here, she and Janice or Kenneth and his family. Noticing that Olivia had put down her bowl, Janice told her, "Eat more. Don't let some trash ruin your mood." Her love rival had come knocking to express superiority. But Janice remained calm. Olivia drank some more of the soup. This concerned a grudge in the Miller family. She got married into the family halfway through, so it had nothing to do with her. Jessica was holding a few exquisite bags in her hand. There was a gentle smile on her face. "Dad, Daryl knows that you're fond of tea. He nurtured and handpicked the leaves for this Darjeeling tea. It came from the most premium sources, you know. Why don't I make some right now for you? You can try and see if it's nice." Lifting his hand, Harold grabbed the container she handed to him and then smashed it onto the ground. Olivia was stunned. If it truly was tea from premium sources, she couldn't imagine how much the whole container might cost. But then, Olivia remembered that it was a gift from a homewrecker. She wished that she could step on the container and ruin it even more. "My house has all the nice things I ever wanted. I don't need your useless things, so don't even think of pleasing me with them. We haven't met in a long time, but you're as shameless as always. I told you last time that the only daughter-in-law I acknowledge is Janice alone. Ethan is also the only grandson of the Miller family. Don't even dream of getting into the Miller family. Get lost with that illegitimate son of yours, and bring my insolent son with you. I don't want to see you at all." Harold's fury toward the family was even deeper than Olivia imagined. After Harold said those words with a reddened face, Olivia hastily helped him sit down. She calmed him down. "Grandpa, calm down. Don't get so worked up." With that, she passed Harold a glass of water. Harold shouldn't get worked up with a condition like that. His condition had always been fluctuating, and he finally went back to normal in the past few days. When Olivia was calming Harold, she sensed a gaze falling upon her. When she looked up, she realized that it was Daryl, whom she met only once before. Daryl had lost miserably to Ethan last time. When they met again this time, he never changed his ways. The things he did were getting more disgusting than the last. As their gazes met, Olivia glared viciously at Daryl. The others didn't notice their movements. Kenneth walked over to Harold. For the first time in many years, he took the initiative to lower his head toward Harold. "You're so old now, but your temper is as stubborn as always. Mom could still hold you back in the past." The complaint brought the two closer. "After so many years, what exactly are you mad about? Do you think that disowning me will cut off the blood ties between us? Your blood runs in my body. He is your grandson, and your blood also runs in his veins." Daryl approached from the left, reaching out to support Harold. He pretended to touch the back of Olivia's hand by accident. Olivia felt as if a venomous snake had grazed the spot where his skin touched hers. She hastily let go and then took a few steps away from Daryl. Chapter 676. But Daryl supported Harold as if nothing had happened. With a considerate look on his face, he said, "Grandpa, Dad was right. It doesn't matter if you acknowledge me or not. It won't change the fact that we're still family in nature." "He's right, Dad." Kenneth was too rash back then, but now, he has seen the error of his ways. He came over today to apologize to you. Please forgive him. They were bombarding left and right, using the term, family, as they wished. These people came prepared. Olivia gradually calmed down as well. Something had just happened to Ethan, but these people came over right away. Was it an accident or a coincidence? Harold wasn't feeling well right now. He felt a little weak, and he didn't even have the energy to reprimand them. Janice, who had been silent all this while, spoke up coldly. Are you deaf or stupid? Do you not understand what Mr. Harold said? Kenneth, you said before that you would never take a step into the Miller residence. Why are you eating your own words now? Kenneth looked at Janice with a complicated gaze. He was more shocked than anything. For the past few days, Janice had been disgracing him when they met. If it were in the past, this would never happen. Janice didn't even look at him. Instead, she turned around and brought Harold's emergency medicine. When Jessica saw that, she finally saw a battlefield she could fight on. I'm sorry, Janice. I know you hate me for snatching Kenneth away, but I didn't mean for things to turn out like this. I'll return Kenneth to you. People have to return to their homes, so please let him come back. Jessica's tactic wasn't new, but Kenneth fell for it anyway. He was about to fly into a rage right away. But this time, Janice spoke up before he did. What's wrong with you, Jessica? Why are you talking to me in such an intimate way? Or are you trying to admit that you are part of a king's harem, and I'm the queen? Fine, if you're already convinced of this, you can work for me from today onward. You'll serve me, and you'll let me bully you without even saying a word in return. Kenneth hastily held Jessica as he glared at Janice. Shut up. We're already divorced, so Jess is my legal wife now. You'd better show some respect. Olivia only felt sad when she saw that. Janice was deeply in love with him for so many years, and she had also given birth to his son. But in the end, he treated her like an enemy. Fortunately, Janice had already thought things through. There wasn't even a trace of hurt on her face, only sarcasm. You know that we're already divorced, and we don't have anything to do with each other anymore. So why is she treating me like that? I don't even know her. She's from some rural slum, but she dares to talk to me like equals. Does she think that she is on par with the Proctor family? Jessica's goal was to provoke Janice, but her background had always been a thorn in her flesh. It was even worse now that she was the wife of a president. The thing she hated the most was anyone bringing up her past. Enough. Janice, you know why I don't like you. It's because of your aggressive attitude. You'll never be as good as Jess. Janice wasn't mad. Instead, she smiled. You're such a joke, Kenneth. Do you think I'm the same woman who kept waiting for you to come home 20 years ago? Why would I want to compare myself with a lowly woman? My family has been in the business for generations. I was ordering people around in my old home, prettying myself up with jewelry and skincare. But what was your little flower doing back then? Throwing out the trash or working the fields? Back then, people lined up to court me. And even now, as long as I'm willing, I can have all the men I want. Why would I get hung up on someone like you? Stop thinking you're all that. Chapter 677. Janice's words almost pissed Kenneth to death. In the past, Janice had always spoken carefully to him. But now, even her punctuation was attacking him. Had this woman always been so sharp-tongued? The thing that gave Kenneth the most heartache was Jessica's painful childhood. But now, Janice had talked about it in such detail. Kenneth felt a little uncomfortable as he held Jessica's waist. Jessica was already sobbing, and she meant it this time. Her greatest taboo was someone mentioning her past. Of all the things to talk about, Janice had chosen the worst topic. Look at you, Janice. You don't look like a proper lady at all. You look more like an aggressive woman. Don't you feel ashamed at all? Kenneth couldn't find any other words to insult her with, so he kept repeating the same things. Kenneth always said that Janice was an aggressive and rude woman. Janice wanted to say something more, but this time, Olivia stepped forward and spoke up. Mr. Miller Sr., it doesn't matter if you're already divorced. Even if she's a random stranger on the street, you shouldn't use words like that to slander her. Moreover, she's a woman who used to love you with all her heart. Janice looked at Olivia in shock. She didn't expect Olivia to stand up for her. Olivia felt nervous, but anger overtook her. I don't know what happened between you two. From the 2 meetings I've seen, your wife is like a glue that keeps sticking to you. She looked gentle, but every word she spoke was an attempt to provoke Mom. And you kept scolding Mom without even realizing what was happening. I can only imagine the horrible attitude you had 20 years ago. Other than loving you, what did Mom do wrong? She even had a child for you, but you never once cared about her. You even insulted her with crude words like that. In the past, she was a pampered princess. But now, she's spoken of as a rude and terrible woman. Your heart ached for your wife, but have you ever thought about Mom's feelings at all? Being reprimanded by someone younger, Kenneth immediately had a cold look on his face. Shut up. This is no place for children to talk. I'm telling you, she ended up like this because she deserved it. From the very start, I told her that I won't love her. Kenneth was probably the most straightforward man in the world. As an onlooker, Olivia got furious in just a few minutes of their conversation. But Janice had experienced the same pain countless times. It was no wonder that Janice would be driven to insanity. Olivia wanted to speak up more for Janice, but Janice pulled Olivia behind her back. Then, she faced Kenneth. Everyone knows that, so you don't have to emphasize that point to every person you see. You don't have to degrade me just to make yourself look high and mighty. You have no right to say anything about me. Janice had indeed changed a lot. If it were before, she would start throwing things around and scream hysterically. But now, she coldly admitted to the fact. Then, after giving Harold the medicine, she helped him up. She gave Kenneth a cold glare. If you truly care about your father, don't provoke him at times like this. This place is no longer your home. Edmund, see the guests off. At that moment, Janice carried herself like the lady of the house. She was noble and firm. In comparison, Jessica leaned into Kenneth's embrace as if she didn't have a skeleton. Olivia thought that she looked quite shameless. The two flanked Harold, getting ready to help him leave. But then, Daryl blocked their path. Grandpa, I'm going to repeat the same things I said. It doesn't matter if you acknowledge me or not, I'm still your biological grandson. Without Ethan, the Miller family will still need an heir. When Daryl spoke of Ethan's absence, everyone in the room looked at him. Chapter 678. Harold looked up at Daryl with a fierce gaze in his eyes. What did you say? Do you know something? An innocent smile remained on Daryl's face. Grandpa, I'd like to have a word with you alone. Are you free right now? He was smiling, but a cold, venomous gaze filled his eyes. It sent chills down the beholder's spine. Harold gave him a thoughtful look. Come to the study with me. Olivia helped Harold to the door. Harold only allowed Daryl and Edmund to enter while the others waited outside. Olivia felt a little uneasy. Harold's emotions were too unstable right now. After all, he was quite old, so she feared that Harold couldn't take it. Janice patted the back of Olivia's hand. Don't worry, Mr. Harold knows what he's doing. With that, she took Olivia to the terrace, where they sat down together. Janice asked the household staff to bring them 2 portions of snacks. Through it all, she never once spared Kenneth a glance. With Janice coaxing her, Olivia ate a few snacks to relieve the discomfort in her stomach. Joanne hurried over and spoke a few words in Janice's ear. Olivia hastily put down the fork in her hand, asking, did they have an answer? Janice nodded. Lowering her voice, she said, according to the autopsy, the bodies didn't belong to Ethan and the others. It was only then that Olivia sighed in relief. That's good to know. It was probably the best answer so far. But Janice touched the bracelet on her wrist. There was a cold look in her eyes. There wasn't anyone else at the scene, and Ethan was missing. Daryl had visited Harold at that moment, so could it be that Ethan was in his hands? Perhaps he wanted to use Ethan to negotiate. Of course, Olivia thought of that as well. Was that jerk trying to piss Harold to death? But Kenneth, the idiot, didn't know what was going on. Walking up to Janice, he said in a haughty and commanding tone, I want you to apologize to Jess. Janice glared viciously at him. Her patience had run out. Apologize my foot. Get lost. With that, she walked toward the study. Kenneth grabbed her arm. Wasn't I nice enough to you, Janice? Olivia was wondering which part of this man attracted Janice other than his good looks. Jessica shouted at the side, Kenny, don't hurt Janice. Even after acting in the over-the-top love triangle for years, Jessica didn't seem to tire of it. In the study, Harold was sitting in the chair. Daryl stood like a grade schooler listening to a lecture. Grandpa, this must be our first time talking at such a close distance, right? Daryl was trying to play the family card. Harold could see from a glance that Daryl would never be on his side. Daryl was completely different from Ethan. Ethan was reserved, and he hid all his emotions in his heart. Daryl looked obedient, but he was the best at betraying people. Harold always disliked people like that. Get straight to the point. What do you want to talk to me about, traitor? Don't think that I don't know what you're trying to do. You can quit the grandson act now. Daryl put a hand to his chest, pretending to look sad. Oh, Grandpa, I'm your grandson after all. How can you be so cold to me? I feel so hurt. He sighed. But then, when he looked up again, he already had a cocky look on his face. Never mind, you don't have much time left anyway, Grandpa. I won't waste my time on a dying man like you. I'm here to talk to you about the inheritance rights to the Miller family. Chapter 679. Even Edmund, who was standing at the side, looked up at the arrogant, illegitimate child. Without waiting for Harold to speak, Daryl continued. You're quite biased, aren't you, Grandpa? The person Dad like is Mom, but you barred her from coming into the house. You won't even acknowledge me, and you call me an illegitimate child. People insult and humiliate me because of that. Ethan shouldn't even have been born in the first place. But he received your love and the resources of the Miller family. Aren't you being too unfair to me? Harold smashed the paperweight near his hand onto the desk. You're a mutt born from an unrecognized union, but you dare make a fuss in front of me. I'm telling you, I never acknowledged your mom back then, and I won't acknowledge you now. And you even want to inherit the family with your position. In your dreams. Daryl sneered. Is that so? Then, if the person you valued so much has died, who are you handing the Miller family to? What do you mean by that? Daryl walked toward Harold. Edmund stared at him warily. I heard that Ethan brought some men to a factory in Silk Bay. Why would he be so foolish? That area is filled with chemical factories, and toxic substances are everywhere. Also, there isn't a single soul within a radius of dozens of miles in that area. If something happened to him, no one would hear his cries for help. Harold had told some men to investigate Daryl. But now, Daryl had exposed himself right away. More accurately, if Daryl wanted to use Ethan to threaten Harold, this would be the best chance for him to do it. Is he in your hands? Harold was quite calm about it. He didn't turn against Daryl right away. Don't put it in such a bad way, Grandpa. I heard that Ethan was in danger, so I went to save him right away. You know, I paid a huge price to rescue him. How is he now? Don't worry, we're both from the Miller family, and we have the same blood flowing in our veins. Of course, I wish for Ethan's safety more than anyone else. I did quite well, so shouldn't you reward me with something, Grandpa? Daryl put on a triumphant smile. After all, he had been waiting forever for this day. What do you want? I saved Ethan, but he's gravely injured. I've already had a doctor operate on him overnight. In his current condition, even if he wakes up, he probably can't go back to the company anymore. You could give me the company, you know. Daryl crouched down, putting his hands on Harold's knees like a docile person. Grandpa, if you acknowledge me as part of the Miller family, I'll treat you with respect as Ethan does. I don't ask for much. I only want you to acknowledge Mom and me at your birthday banquet. Harold was furious. Are you threatening me? No, I'm negotiating with you. You know that Dad has worked very hard to establish a business for the past few years. He finally got to where he is right now, but he can't even compare with 1/100th of the Miller family. He is your only son, so how can you bear to let him be criticized out there? Moreover, I'm on par with Ethan. I can do the things he can and even the things he cannot do. I just want you to look at me, too. What if I decline? Harold spoke in a cold voice. Well, then, Daryl's voice suddenly turned cold as well. He said nonchalantly, I won't be able to guarantee Ethan's safety. Just then, Olivia opened the door to the study. She glared coldly at Daryl. What did you do to him? Chapter 680. Faced with Olivia's questions, Daryl smiled victoriously. He looked like victory was finally in his hands, hence erasing his past shame. Calm down, Olivia. Ethan shares the same blood as mine, so why would I hurt him? I especially went to save him, but he was severely injured. They're still trying to save his life. How is he exactly? Where is he? Harold touched the beads on his bracelet. You say that he's in your hands, so where's the evidence? Daryl took out his phone and then played a video that lasted a few seconds. In the video, a man was lying on the bed, and he was seemingly going through an emergency rescue. He wore an oxygen mask on his face, and he was surrounded by doctors. Everyone could see that the face was Ethan's. How is he right now? After the emergency rescue, his life is no longer endangered. You don't have to worry about that. Ethan is an important pawn under my control, so how can I let anything happen to him? Having gotten the upper hand, Daryl decided to quit pretending. He blatantly called Ethan his pawn. How can I believe you with one video? Of course, you don't have to believe me, Grandpa. But since you refuse to acknowledge me as one of the Millers, he's not my older brother either. If the doctors refuse to do their best, you can't blame me for that. You jerk. Harold grabbed Daryl's collar, a furious expression appearing on his face. But Daryl remained calm. Don't get mad, Grandpa. You shouldn't ruin your health over this. I don't want to do this, but it's your fault for not acknowledging me. I only want to take back the things that rightfully belong to me. Edmund and Olivia came forward to calm Harold down as well. They feared that he might have health issues from being too angry. Grandpa, sit down and take a break. You can take your time to discuss it. It's fine as long as Ethan is still alive. Yes, Mr. Harold, you have to take good care of your body at crucial times like this. Harold panted heavily, finally managing to adjust his breathing. Let me see him. I can't do that. If you know where he is, I'll lose this ace up my sleeve. Just acknowledge me as part of the Miller family at your birthday banquet, Grandpa. Then, I'll let you see Ethan. Harold glared at him with a vicious look. As expected, you're just like your mom. You're all ambitious scum. Instead of getting mad, Daryl smiled. For the Millers, a cruel person has more potential, right, my wonderful grandpa? Harold could only agree to his demands for the moment. After all, if Daryl was telling the truth, Ethan was on the brink of death. It wasn't the time for Harold to be concerned about those things. Having received the answer he was expecting, Daryl smiled. Thank you for being understanding, Grandpa. That's more like it. We're a family, so we should have behaved like this sooner. So, you won't object if my parents and I move back, right? Harold suppressed the rage in his heart. Do whatever you like. I've already agreed to your requests, so show me more of Ethan's videos. It's best if you can let him video call me. Ethan has just undergone an operation, so he hasn't woken up yet. I can't arrange for a video call, but videos should be fine. I'll ask someone to send more later. You don't look too well, Grandpa. Should I help you back to your room to rest? No need. Fine, I'm busy with loads of stuff, after all. I don't have time to spend with you. Edmund, get someone to prepare 3 rooms, Daryl said in a commanding tone. Edmund glanced at Harold. Then, he said in exasperation, all right. I hope that when you talk to me next time, you'll call me Mr. Daryl.